Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Discourse number 25 with Sajjad Ayub and Shaykh Ebrahim Schuitma. Today's discourse is about love. The whole story of the existence is a story of love. What are we to understand from this?
There's several sort of perspectives that one can pursue to kind of understand this thing. The one is that without making any assumptions based on what we've been exposed to textually, if you consider the multiplicity of things and the complexity of that multiplicity, and the way in which this multiverse of phenomena has been allowed to go out and become itself, that surely speaks of the most immense generosity of spirit. I mean, it speaks of an immense overflowing of beneficence. You could imagine that if this was the product of a human being that who would just so absolutely ceaselessly and with immense creativity just constantly pour out more and more stuff, create more, this sense of overflowing has to come from a place of fullness that we can only experience or describe as love. Because one of the ways that one can describe what is the antonym of love? Well, I mean, one of the ways of understanding the antonym of love is kind of an emptiness. Love is a fullness of heart, is a generosity of spirit. Then the opposite of love must be an emptiness of heart and a paucity of spirit. And so, if you just look around you and you see how full the world is with an immense overflowing, from the design that's implicit in an ant to the design that's implicit in a tree, to the just the way in which the universe is constructed and how all things are put together to make life viable, and then one has to assume that sitting behind this is an immense fullness, an immense overflowing. And I think it is appropriate to refer to that as love. Another way of understanding love is one always understands things by antonyms. That's a good way to start. So another way of describing love is that it is the inverse of love could be described as hate. Love and hate is something that we'd like to make a binary opposite of. And so what are all the things that are implicit in hate? Well, it's separation. It is alienation. It is trivialization. Oh, you are so beneath me. And so love is the opposite of all of that. And why is it necessary that the opposite of all of that should be the cornerstone of being, the cornerstone of existence? I think is apparent when, even in the most simple design, a person, and obviously the only other rational being that we have immediate access to is other human beings, or conscious being. So if no person would deliberately set out to produce something that they think is demeaned or trivial. When people, at least they'll, all human beings love their creatures. They consider them worthy, otherwise they wouldn't have brought in the attention to make them. So that love should be at the root of this creational story, I think makes sense to me. Also that the opposite of that alienation is kind of its antonym, because it's one of the implicit kind of significances of hate. Well, I mean, if alienation has to, by definition, be an illusion. I mean, it's like, how can you, to be alienated is to be apart from. But how can you be apart from that which is everywhere? So in that sense, alienation has to be illusory, which means that love is the truth and alienation is the illusion. Separation is the illusion. Oneness is the truth, the sense of separation and multiplicity and a divergence. That's an illusion. It's a beautiful illusion. There's nothing wrong with the illusion, because in fact, even that illusion itself is part of the story of love, because he himself said of himself that he created because he loved to be known. Which is saying that he made what is apparent other than him so that he can be rediscovered. And the being which is most apparently other than him is the human being. Because we've got this dual nature. We have this thing which is clearly a creature. We are puny. We are not particularly viable. I mean, if we die easily. We're these small, tiny little creatures holding our little fists out at existence. So, but at the same time, we can create extraordinary stuff. So we have the whole range. We're the demeaned and the elevated. We're the opposite of him. So why did he make us the opposite? This being which, in fact, even the angels were aghast at when he made us. They said, "Don't you realize what you're doing? I mean, these creatures are going to create mischief in the world." And he said, "Well, I know that which you don't." So, and then he made us. So what did he know? He knew that this thing, which is apparently, which has a capacity to immense evil, a capacity to immense opposite of love, will rediscover love in the fullness of time. Mm-hmm. So he made us to be alienated, to come back to him. So from every point of view, the entire creational story has to be a story of love. In the first instance, in the big picture, the creational story of the multiverse, of all of the things that are out there and the creation of myriad things, that would not be possible if there wasn't an overflowing beneficence that sat behind it all, which means that its nature is its source is love. Also, that a place of separation, which is what we consider to be one of the significance of antonyms of love, being hate, separation, that's logically impossible. There's no place where he is not. But then finally, even in our illusory state of separation, that is also a story of love, because that is the way whereby he discovers himself, whereby he is known. You don't know a thing if you're pickled in it. It's like the fish don't understand that they're in water. You only know a thing when you stand apart from it. And so if you're pickled in this oneness, this unified sense of being, and this sort of connectedness with all things, then you're not going to know that. You're not going to know firsthand, experientially, this thing, because it's part of the backdrop of your being. How do you know it? Is because you're taken out of it. Alienated. You suffered that alienation. Now you know when you come back. Now you know the value. You know, metaphor for this is our experience of of good health. If you, on a routine basis, reflect on things that you could be grateful for. I mean, just something as simple as the fact that you could digest the roti that you had for supper last night into the ability to be conscious now and give me attention. That's the most stupendous thing. I mean, the chemistry of that is stupendous. I mean, it's the most unbelievable Jesus behind that. But the problem is you're not aware of that. I mean, you just take it for granted. And I mean, that's just the turning of the roti into the ability to be awake. I mean, what about all the other? So in fact, we are floating on a sea of blessing. Most of it we're completely not conscious of. So how do we make you conscious of the fact that you should be really grateful for the ability to turn your roti into blood sugar so that you can give me attention? Well, let's give you diabetes. Then suddenly you realize, hold on, this is quite a job, this managing that translation of the roti into the ability to be awake. This is not a simple matter. This requires me to stick needles in my arm and all sorts of horrible things. So in other words, it is only once you've lost the thing that you recognize what it is. You see, so I mean, we take our good health absolutely for granted. You know, I mean, you get a person who's complete unbeliever, complete kafir, doesn't believe that there's such a thing as a God, thinks this is all just Darwinian accents, you know, you know, kind of until they get a dreaded disease, a cancer or whatever, and then suddenly they realize, but hold on, you know, there's all of these things that I took for granted that I couldn't manage. Because if I say that there isn't a God, it means I can manage the affair. I can manage the affair of my life. Well, actually, apparently, but only apparently. You know, so your life is floating on a sea of blessing, a sea of things that have been bequeathed to you completely unconditionally. I mean, that's another attribute of love, the ability to give away, completely unconditionally given. But because it's so unconditional, you don't even know that it's there. And you only discover it's there when it's taken away, when it's lost. And so our experience of suffering, and suffering by definition is all a subset of being alienated, being separated from, feeling under threat, being compromised. All of that is the tool, is the pathway that allows us to rediscover how much we've been given. So I think it's quite appropriate to describe the whole of existence to be a story of love, to be the story of the most immense love, and which also then suggests that the study of illusion, of that which seems to be but isn't, would be a study of hate. To traffic in hate is to traffic in illusion.
And are we to understand that at some point, all of us, no matter how intelligent or how clever, we have to give up and surrender and give up our design for our life?
Well, I think that has to be true. I mean, even people who do, so I've worked with a number of executives in my life who've apparently made it, who were very successful. And while they were congratulating themselves on their success, it is just a question of time. The catastrophe was at hand. They'd either have a dreaded disease, they'd go through a horrendous divorce. The business that they were running so well and so capably got bought by new owners, and they ended up working for a boss who actually thought they were an idiot. And this illusion of capability came crashing down around their ears. There's literally an infinite number of ways in which a golden career can come crashing down. And it is those people who congratulate themselves that their golden career was the product of their own ingenuity. Those are the ones whose careers at some point come crashing down. And if they don't come crashing down, then retirement for those people is an unspeakable nightmare, because that's an introduction to complete meaninglessness. So even those who are most demonstrably capable will discover that, in fact, this is not the case. The opposite of that is, in my experience of working with people in sort of senior positions in organizations, very senior people, is that those who recognize that they have what they have because they've been privileged. They haven't earned it. It's not their intelligence that's produced this. They were privileged, partly they were privileged by whatever they brought into the business. I mean, maybe they brought some capability, some skill, but they don't even arrogate that to themselves. They assign that, they ascribe that to what has been bequeathed to them, And when they're in the business, they also minimize the contribution that they've made. They have the capacity to recognize the contribution of everybody else in the business. And because they have that magnanimity of spirit, they cultivate people in the business who are loyal to them, and that loyalty produces the robustness of the business. So it is when the person then surrenders their idea that they're in charge and they can make it all happen, and they subordinate themselves to the possibility of there being a higher order plan that they would then participate in realizing but aren't the masters of. That's when the enterprise is basically in safe hands. There's nothing that kills enterprises quicker than the hubris of leaders, and there's nothing that's healthier for enterprises than the humility of leaders. So that just goes to demonstrate that we are here to forego our plans, and the more clever we think we are, the more dangerous our plans are, both to ourselves and others. And the last thing you can trust is a human being that who sort of has the stiffening of the spine and the sort of flaring of the nostrils, saying, well, I know what needs to be done. And, those people very often end up making wreckage of both themselves and of the lives around them. And also, they will be brought low. I mean, you see, the issue is that surely the final outcome of every life is death. So explain to me what the attributes of a successful corpse are. I mean, that's a bizarre notion. There's nothing about a corpse is so unsuccessful it can't even get out of bed to go to the toilet. It is finished. It is done. In other words, this ending isn't triumphal. It is not a standing on the mountaintop with a heroic pose and a flag. It is the opposite. It's being casted off to a hole in the ground where people walk away and leave you. I mean, what kind of a model of success is that? And if it wasn't for the fact that this was the final truth of our lives, then we wouldn't spend so much time trying to anesthetize ourselves against it and trying to avoid the matter like it's like not good party conversation, Nobody likes to be reminded of the closeness and the proximity of death. But it's precisely the proximity of death that is the final witness, the incontrovertible witness to the fact that you are not here to be in charge. You are not here to take charge. You are here to be laid low. You're not here to triumph, you're here to be overcome. No human being triumphs into perpetuity. Every human being will be overcome. It has happened to the prophets, it'll happen to us. No human being has dodged that problem. So, to have this idea that you are the final arbiter and the judge and you're in charge of your life and you have all of these grand plans, you know, that's just completely naive. You haven't lived very long if you try to convince yourself of that. All that you have to do is go and visit your local cemetery. I mean, but go to a place where they do have the habit of writing things on tombstones, you know, because in South Africa, Muslim cemeteries are about as uninteresting as they get, you know. But so in Turkey, you've got interesting cemeteries, you know, these pillars with these turbans on top and lots of writing. So you go to any cemetery, you see all the stories on there. And I mean, actually, those people are completely anonymous. Whatever's written on that piece of stone is, there's nobody there to recognize what they're actually saying here. I mean, we put on my late father's tombstone, here lies Ebrahim Schuitma, a soldier and a miner, and then his date of birth and date of death. But I mean, I don't know. Anybody walks past this and go, okay, that's interesting. But they probably wouldn't even know what war he served in. They certainly wouldn't have known what kind of contribution he made. And miner, what the hell, you know, I mean, what does that mean? Did he manage mines? Was he a laborer? Was he, how long? You know, so it's actually just, his life has actually passed. Like water has gone under the bridge. It has now been swept off. And this little scarifying that we've put on a piece of granite in this miserable little cemetery in the west, in the northwest province of South Africa, it's beyond a caricature. Just absolutely no description. So in other words, this man who died in his late 70s, who worked underground for 42 years, fought in the Second World War, went to North Africa, went to Italy, that entire account is gone. It is finished. So how in charge was he of the affair? You know, so it's just go and visit a local cemetery and try and reconstruct the stories, the lies, just from what you see on the tombstones. Not possible. Those lives are gone. And I mean, that my father died in 86. So this is comparatively recent. So what about a lot that was a century prior to that? I mean, then, I mean, in fact, your own ancestors, Sajjad, if you walk past if one of your ancestors came back from the dead today and walked past you in the street, this person you'd be a direct line of descent from the person. You wouldn't recognize them. You wouldn't know who they were. They'd be a complete stranger. They've bequeathed you their genetics. You don't know them. That's how gone their lives are. So this idea that we can make it work, that we're in charge, this is just completely bizarre. Completely bizarre. You know, I mean, one of the things that we try and be in charge of is the assets, you know, the kind of the wealth and the sort of, we think, you know, if I can own it, I can manage it, I can got it under my hands, like I can own the property. And then we're reminded of that beautiful Australian Aboriginal quote. I heard from somebody, you know, all land disputes are two fleas arguing who the dog belongs to. And that's who we are. That's our disputes and our arguments. You know, we are fleas belonging who this dog belongs to. We're fleas arguing, rather, who this dog belongs to. You know, this dog of this planet that we're on. And by the way, this dog probably thinks increasingly we have a little bit of an uncomfortable infestation and needs to do something about us. Maybe that's why we got COVID.
Yeah. Very good idea.
Maybe COVID is like the equivalent of planetary flea powder.
I think so. I absolutely do think so. And if it was still here, if we're still here, does that mean that we still have to fulfill our purpose? And those
well,
that
I think
pass,
this is true. Yeah, finished? What do you say?
I was going to say, and those who pass on, have they fulfilled their purpose?
Well, okay. So the first I think is true. I don't think the second is true.
Right.
So let me deal with the first one first. I think our lives comprise two core moments, two core elements. There's how we see, there's what we see, there's our witnessing part of our life, and there's our what we do, the active part of our life, the action part of our life, right? You can describe all of our actions like walking up a pass, up a mountain, in order to deliver us to a place where we can look out and see his universe and be enthralled. And so if we haven't died yet, then we're still walking up the pass. That in fact we only get to the viewing point on the last moment. I mean, so everything that our whole life builds up to that possibility. However, the second part of that, I do think we can die not having arrived at our viewing point because we've squandered the journey. I do think that's possible. I do think we can die with regret. Yeah.
And on that note, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.